let's begin. I'm Marco Wan. I'm based here at the HKU Law Faculty. Welcome to panel F4. And before we begin, just a couple of housekeeping matters. For the audience, if you have questions for our panelists, you're warmly welcome to type the questions into the chat box, either during the session or towards the end. And for the speakers, you'll have about 20 minutes for your presentations, and I'll give you a signal on the chat box at the 5-minute mark and at the 2-minute mark. So we've got a set of really interesting papers this evening. I'm very much looking forward to the session. Our first speaker will be Annie Chan from the Department of Sociology and Social Policy at Lingnan University. And her paper is entitled Tackling Upskirting and Other Kinds of Image-Based Sexual Violence in Hong Kong. Annie, great to have you.
Yeah, okay, so I'll begin. So this is the topic of my sharing. It's called Tackling Upskirting and Other Kinds of Image-Based Sexual Violence in Hong Kong. And I'll use IBSV in short for image-based sexual violence. And by upskirting, I mean people who take photographs up women's skirts, but that also includes other kinds, obviously, women's body parts, including down browsing and so on, but mainly upskirting. So other kinds of image-based sexual violence I'm not going to talk so much about, although I think the implications of what I want to share with you may also apply to other kinds. So firstly, I want to talk a little bit about the extent of image-based sexual violence in Hong Kong. Yes, and here you can see some links to recent studies and statistics on the situation in Hong Kong. So feel free to take a screenshot of this, or you can email me and I will send you the documents and the data as well. The first one is done by the Association Concerning Sexual Violence Against Women in Hong Kong. And this is, I believe, the first survey on image-based sexual violence in Hong Kong. It was done in 2021. And respondents of this study were individuals who have experienced IBSV. And the sample consists of 206 individuals, including 187 female, 18 male, and 1 transgender person. And they're mostly between the ages of 20 to 24 and also 15 to 19. And according to this survey, the most commonly experienced type of IBSV is intimate images taken without consent. And public transport was the most commonly reported place where this happened. And amongst the perpetrators, 116 were strangers and 28 were unknown. So the vast majority of people, of the perpetrators, were actually people who were known to the victims. So this is the first set of data that we have, the survey done in 2021. Next, we have some statistics from the Hong Kong government's Security Bureau. And according to their data, between 2015 and 2018, out of the 215 convicted cases under the laws of loitering, disorder in public places, outraging public decency, and access to computer with criminal or dishonest intent, 73% of the convicted 200 cases were related to upskirt photography and uploading intimate images without consent. So you may be asking, why are these related to upskirting? Because prior to October of last year, Hong Kong did not have specific legislation on image-based sexual violence. So charges of loitering, etc., were the only laws that could be used to convict the perpetrators, the criminals. Okay, so it doesn't sound like a lot, right? 200 cases. All right. So the next study is one that was I participated in as well, which was just completed this year. It was a study on Hong Kong women's experiences of violence, which was just published. And in this study, we did not only target women who have had experiences of violence or of IBSV, so it's like more like a general survey of the situation. And amongst the sample, which is over 1,000 women, amongst those who had experiences of sexual violence, 9.5% of them said that the most serious sexual violence incident that they have ever experienced are image-based. Okay, so this gives you another idea of how prevalent this kind of sexual violence is. And finally, at the bottom here, I have a link to this organization that is called Caritas Specialized Treatment and Prevention Project Against Sexual Violence. In Chinese, it's called 廊天, and I'll be referring it to 廊天 hereafter, because the study that I will share my findings with you about later is a collaboration with this organization. So according to 廊天, which they offer support and counseling to perpetrators of sexual violence, IBSV cases of their new intake clients have increased from 38% in 2015 to 77.5% in 2021. So that is a huge increase in the number of cases referred to them or people who went to them for help because of image-based sexual violence, predominantly upskirting. So given the very large numbers of online groups, forums, and websites, etc., that are dedicated to IBSV, specifically upskirting, these figures that I've just described to you are probably just the tip of a very large iceberg. So next, I would like to share with you very quickly about the legislation in Hong Kong, which is related or was related to IBSV. So prior to October 2021, there were no specific legislation in Hong Kong that tackles IBSV, and these cases can only be charged under what you can see on the screen here, such as, like I have described earlier, loitering, outraging public decency, disorder in public places. So please note that these three charges only applies to public areas, right? And also access to computer with criminal or dishonest intent was used to deal with IBSV, although because of reasons I will not have time to talk about now, this is no longer really valid. And of course, other general laws, including criminal intimidation, blackmail, or possession with intention and or distribution of obscene and indecent articles, and also creation of nuisance through sending obscene and indecent messages. These can also be applied to deal with IBSV cases. So you can see prior to October 2021, because there were no specific laws about IBSV, the public's understanding of it was very, very minimal. It probably still is quite minimal because the new laws have not been out for very long. So since October 2021, after a period of consultation and work done by the Law Reform Commission, 4 new offenses have been added under the Crimes Ordinance, and these are voyeurism, and this offense is specifically targeting at peeping or clandestine photography in circumstances that give rise to a reasonable expectation of privacy. And the second new offense is unlawful recording or observation of intimate parts, and this targets upskirting and downblousing photography and videography. And the third offense is publication of images originating from voyeurism or unlawful recording or observation of intimate parts. And the fourth new offense is publication or threatened publication of intimate images without consent. Okay, so the victim, which means the victim might have agreed to have those images captured, but did not agree to for them to be published, right? So this targets IBSV, such as revenge porn. A maximum conviction under these new offenses is 5 years imprisonment. Now, the interesting thing is, under some of these previous laws that are used to tackle IBSV, the maximum sentence could be actually higher than 5 years. Okay, so this is the situation, right? So it's great, we have these new laws. So how useful are these laws is the question that we want to ask. But their effects are still to be seen, because there's now a very clear, message sent to the public that IBSV is a serious criminal behavior and that falls under the sex crimes category of the Crimes Ordinance. So the indication is very, very clear. Let me just see if there's anything here. Okay, no, right, so I'll move on. So this is the main part of my sharing. It's about a qualitative study that I have done in the past 2 years about men who take upskirt photographs. So first, I'll just very quickly describe the study to you. So on the left of the screen, you can see the published hard copy of the report. If you want one, let me know. I can send you one. There's a soft copy as well online, I believe, in Long Team's website. So this is a collaboration with Long Team. And what I've done is I interviewed 50 of their new intakes within 1 calendar year. And these new service users mostly have had very little counseling, only 1 or maximum 3 counseling sessions. But later on in the study, we did speak to some men who have received more counseling. And the method used is an in-depth interview. So I'll just go straight into the findings. So firstly, how did these men get into upskirting? That's the question that a lot of people would like to know. So on the right here in orange, you will see quotes from the interviews. So some of them describe their experiences with upskirt-themed pornography, and also having browsed websites or online groups or have seen these images being sent to them, etc. And specifically with these groups, upskirting online groups, what some interviewees have described is that the members in these groups would encourage each other to try and also to use new methods, new techniques to take these, to capture these images. Some of them also refer to normalized secret filming or 偷拍, right, in Cantonese, as part of popular culture. For example, they would refer to paparazzi culture, which they would take pictures of celebrities up their skirts or down their blouses, or pictures of their personal lives. And also, many of these men, they have actually seen other men done it in real life, right? They would have seen it in a shop, they would have seen it on the MTR, on the train. So for them, it is something that is normal, and I put that in quotation marks, is normal and not serious because it's so prevalent. So they mostly describe the first time of them doing it as unplanned. It's completely unplanned. It's not like robbing a bank or a heist, you planned it earlier. No, they did not. And they describe it as just for fun, 貪玩, and there was no difficulty in doing it at all. So I'll just read one of these quotes, the bottom one. On the right, this man says, to put it simply, if you browse OpenRice a lot, and OpenRice is a restaurant review website which is very popular in Hong Kong. So if you browse OpenRice a lot, and you see a lot of these restaurants, naturally you would want to find those restaurants to try. So this is almost like the logical next step is to try it for yourself. So secondly, after having successfully done it for the first time without getting caught, although some of the interviewees did get caught the first time they did it, they all said it's impossible to not do it again because the attraction of doing it and the satisfaction that they get from doing it is just too great. But ironically, having done it for too long, they begin to realize the pointlessness and the tedium of it and the repetitiveness, repetitive pictures that they're seeing. Okay, so some of them would try to stop for a while, but very soon they would do it again. So some of them would describe it as an addiction. It's almost like a drug. And I'll just read this quote on the right here, the bottom one. This man says, at one point it became boring and it felt pointless, but the next day this thought would disappear and I'll go again because every time you go out, you see new targets. There's an endless supply of new women and their legs and for them to imagine what might be under their skirts, okay? So even though it gets routinized and bored, there's still something that captures them, that entices them to do it again because there's always that amount of novelty there. Right, so how do they explain it to themselves? How do they understand why they did what they did? Okay, so this is the question, how do they explain it? So many of them thought that they have been affected by porn, specifically the porn lens, I call it, which reveal what is initially covered up. So in upskirting or secret filming themed pornography, that is usually what is presented is the lens is almost like the eyes of the man, right? And they would look at a woman and do all kinds of things, and eventually what is covered will be revealed. So they would say that this has affected them. So some said they were curious about women's bodies, and others said they have unmet sexual needs. For example, they would have a girlfriend, but it's just too much to go to sex motels, or they would have a wife, or the wife is too tired to have sex with them, that kind of thing. Also, many of them would describe everyday life pressures, such as this quote on the right, at the bottom one. This man says, my relationship with my wife was bad, finances was bad, etc. And he said, I didn't want to control myself. After I had to face my complaining wife, etc., why do I still need to control what I wanted to do? I felt so fed up. So it's almost like a way for him to unleash the pressure that he was feeling. So many of them describe everyday life pressures, and they feel have experienced some traumatic life events, but they are in the minority. Okay, so and in general, most interviewees did not really understand. They did not have a good explanation of why they did it, why they did upskirting. Okay, and the fourth point, how do they persuade, or how do they allow themselves to keep doing it? Okay, so they all know that this is the wrong thing, even though it's very common, it's routinized, and they think it's trivial. They still admit that this is the wrong thing for them to do, right? So why do they keep doing it? So, and the reason is because they were normal with the help of many other things and contexts. They were able to normalize and trivialize it because these images are so easily available. There was so much of it. They have this feeling that it's a very common thing that men would take upskirt photos of images of women. So another very important point is their belief that it is harmless. It's almost like a victimless crime. So the thing that they want, they focus on is not to be discovered rather than not doing it. Okay, because if they are not discovered, no harm is done. Also, they're ignorant of the legal consequences of upskirting, and having also they have a very weak understanding of what sexual violence is, and it's something that I'll come back to later. Some of them understood upskirting as an invasion of privacy, and in Cantonese it's 侵犯私隱, right? Instead of sexual privacy, right? Or without doing something without the other person's consent. So those are not the concepts that they use to understand it. So if they understand it as an invasion of privacy, is actually they're actually desexualizing upskirting. And some others would think that upskirting is something that falls under the more general category of just casual filming. Okay, so for example, the quote on the top on the right here, this man says, well, I use my phone to take photos of other things too, like food, scenery, etc. So upskirting is just one of them. So by categorizing upskirting under the umbrella of general filming and taking of photos, he is able to persuade himself that it's not actually that bad. Okay, and about their weak understanding of sexual violence, I think the second quote is also worth quickly going through. When I ask him what he thinks sexual violence is, he says, well, sexual violence, is it SM, asphyxiation, those things? I can't accept those things. So the next point is about seeking help, right? After having spoken to this man, I understand now that it's very, very difficult for them to speak about it to anybody, right? They could talk about it only anonymously on these online forums and groups, right, when they can hide their identity, but they cannot actually bring themselves to talk about it to anybody, right? So, and some of them said that they were glad to have been caught, because if they had not been caught, they would not be able to stop. So what I want to point out is that they find themselves in a very helpless, in a very, very difficult situation, actually. So how do they try to stop, right, now that they've been caught? Some of them have been sentenced as well. So how do they make themselves stop? So the methods that they have are quite limited. The first thing they do is to try to remind themselves of the hurt that what they have done has caused to people who care about them. And the second is to remind themselves of the pain and the loss that they themselves have suffered. Some have lost jobs, some were unable to emigrate together with their family, etc. Some have had their family members and wives or girlfriends not talking to them anymore. So most of them would just also rely on very mechanical ways to not do it, right? So that would be avoiding so-called triggers and also stimulants. So if they see an attractive woman in front of them on the escalator, they would just try to go past her, or they would wait at the bottom until there's a man in front of him or someone wearing trousers, and then they would go on the escalator. That kind of very mechanical methods. So counseling does help, but because of time, I'm not going to go through the details here. So I'll just very quickly go on to the implications. So on the individual level, what drawn these men to upskirting are these factors that are listed here. Rather than some kind of perversion or pathology, Okay, and these men, they have limited ways to deal with stress, and they have become familiarized with the lens that is used in porn. That means the visuals that are used in porn and in upskirting media, so that when they do see women in real life, it is very, very easy for them to switch to that mode or even slide into that mode and expect what is originally covered to be seen. So it's almost like a natural progression or even an entitlement to seeing what's under women's skirts that they're not able to articulate and they're not even aware of. Secondly is gender culture, which is part of the gender system. This also plays a very important role as to why these men were able to allow themselves to do this to women. They're not misogynists in the superficial or traditional understanding of the word, in that they do not hate women. On the contrary, they love women's bodies and women's sexuality. But they do subscribe to a kind of gender essentialism, and they believe that women's increased social status is related to their assets, quote unquote, i.e. their erotic capital, as sociologist Catherine Hackham would call it. So women's sexuality is seen as a trap, right? In short, they disrespect women without being aware of it. And next, of course, is sexual and pornographic culture. This culture also plays a very important role and is very intimately tied with gender culture, because this culture does not problematize men's sexual desires, and that these desires need to be satisfied, and I believe these need to be problematized. And their familiarity of using pornographic media as a normal means to pass time, right, and to relieve stress means that upskirting is very easily normalized. And finally, many aspects of societal culture also actively encourages upskirting. Casual as well as secret filming or image capturing without the subject's consent is very much normalized, and is almost seen as a legitimate and even essential pastime for us people of the 21st century, and a form of entertainment. It's very easy for upskirting to be seen as just part of this wider culture. Although, paradoxically, like I've mentioned earlier, upskirting cannot be talked about in an open way, and those who talk about it can only do so behind the anonymity of the internet. So finally, to conclude, a few takeaways. So I feel from the findings of this study and the situation of IBSV in Hong Kong as an example, we need to, in education and in advocacy, we need to problematize how the porn lens or the paparazzi lens would take over men's eyes, their vision in real life, right? So we need to understood and acknowledge that this is a problem. We also need to problematize, I feel, the ethics concerning any kind of non-consensual image recording, not just upskirting. And finally, I won't have time to talk about this in detail, but hopefully later on in the discussion we can talk about this a little bit more. And I feel this is about the nomenclature, specifically the terms that are used in Chinese in Hong Kong at the moment to describe things related to IBSV. Because these terms like symbolic, like sexual violence, they do not reinforce a correct understanding of sexual violence, which should be consent-based. And terms like voyeurism and secret filming also do not accurately capture the nature and seriousness of the violation that is upskirting and IBSV more generally. And on that note, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Annie, for that fascinating paper. Next, we have Feng Yuan from Equality Beijing, and her paper is entitled Difference and Indifference, Understanding Domestic Violence Under COVID-19.
好，谢谢。那我现在开始哈。很高兴今天有这么机会到这样的一个论坛上，来分享。我尽量的会节约时间。好，那我呢会是从3个视角来看我们的这个疫情时期的家庭暴力和反家庭暴力。先呢我简单的是讲一下我今天这3个视角。第一个视角呢是疫情期间的家暴调查，家暴情况调查。第二个视角呢就是疫情时期主流媒体对家庭暴力的报道。第3个视角呢就是疫情期间法院受理家庭暴力保护令的情况。那么对 第一个呢是疫情时期家庭暴力的情况调查，按照就北京 SDG 5促进组在2020年9至10月对中国大陆的一个就是互联网的网上调查呢，差不多收到了将近2万份的问卷，其中呢有11000多份呢，完成度到96%，所以呢，对这11000多份的问卷的分析，就是表明，差不多将近27%的受访者其中主要是女性，顺性别女性，那么也是40岁以下的受访者也是为主，那么然后呢再包括顺性别的男性还有呢自认为不属于现有的常规性别的人群呢也有4%。那么从这个调查当中呢，我们可以发现，在疫情期间，刚才说了有差不多27%的人遭遇到了家暴，那么家庭呢，遭遇到了各种形式的暴力，其中家庭是暴力发生的最普遍发生的场所那么家人呢，也是最主要的实施暴力的实施者那我们可以看到差不多30%的辱骂和攻击还是发生在家里，85%的殴打发生在家里，1半左右的阻止就医发生在家里，而1/4的性侵犯也发生在家里这都是比较高的。那互联网上呢发生的最高的是辱骂、攻击、语言暴力，还有互联网上的性骚扰。那么我们也看到了隔离就是限制出行和一些机构的防疫措施呢，让遭受暴力的人群在这个时间呢，就是难以摆脱风险，而且难以获得有效的这个信息和支援那么我们这个调查呢，对于不同的人群做了一些分类他把就是特定人群当中包括残障人士，包括外出务工经商的女性，包括多元性别人群、少数民族女性、受 HIV 影响的女性、60岁以上的女性以及顺性别女性。当然这个分析呢是有些女性她可能多重身份可能有些残障女性，但她同时也是顺性别女性。但我们这里呢就是完全是以她那个填答的这个情况为主呢，我们可以看到残障人士如果他的主要身份认同是残障人士的话呢，其实差不多47%的人46%的人呢是遭遇过不同形式的暴力的，那其中就是辱骂攻击是最主要的，有1/3的人遭遇到第二个呢就是经济控制，然后呢就是性骚扰。那第二个人群遭遇到性别暴力比较多的呢，就是多元性别的人群性少数，大家看到也是差不多40%的人有遭遇，也是辱骂攻击是第1位的，经济控制和被性骚扰呢是第2位的。好，时间关系呢，我就不一一来介绍这个 PPT 上的内容了。好，那么我这里呢是想说明一下呢，我主要是介绍了北京 SDG 5促进组的调查，其实呢在疫情期间呢也有一些其他的调查，有的是分具体人群的有的呢是主要就是说一般的考察疫情对人群的影响。那这里面我们就可能知道有性别视角的这个访问呢，就可能能揭示出更多的性别暴力的存在的问题。好，第二个视角呢，我就是和大家来很快的看一下疫情时期主流媒体对家庭暴力的报道。这个呢主要是用的慧科这样的一个就新闻数据库它是目前对中文媒体收集的最全的，包括大陆的媒体中文媒体包括香港、台湾新加坡那个马来西亚甚至美洲 的这个中文媒体。所以这里指的中文媒体，所有的中文媒体，就是蓝颜色的呢，就是包括全世界的中文媒体。当然主要数量最多的呢还是中国大陆的媒体，新闻媒体。这里呢主要其实是报纸的电子版和报纸做的新闻网站。好，那我们从这里头来那个比较的话呢，我们可以看到全球的这个中文媒体，如果从一个总体来看呢，全球的新闻媒体对于家庭暴力的这个报道要高于中国大陆媒体对跟家庭暴力有关的报道。那么而且我们看到疫情期间，就是2020年的第1季度，这是疫情的最高峰，但是中国大陆媒体当中呢，对对家庭暴力的报道其实是最少的，是最少的，数量上那么全球呢也是比较少的一个阶段那基本上是这样。那么在另外的一些就是中国大陆疫情的第2轮、第3轮的爆发时间呢，我们也可以看到中国大陆媒体对于家庭暴力的报道也是相对来少的。那么我们可以看到呢，中国大陆媒体的这个报道当中呢，它可以看到我们是基本上把它分成这个几类，就是一类呢，我们可以更多的是来看到媒体就是对反家暴机构的呈现度，就是他提到了比如说公安、警察、法院、检察院或者是妇联等等这些机构。那么还有呢反家暴措施就指保护令、警察的告诫书，或者是警察的拘留，或者是监护权的转移，或者是庇护，或者是经济救助等等这就是措施。那么从这个分析当中呢，大家这个图如果能看到的话，那么我们看到对媒体的呈现度明显的高于对反家暴措施的呈现度。我们这里举的就是有比较多的媒体的就是有家庭暴力报道的媒体有这么20-30个。大家可以看到就是几乎所有的媒体都是对机构的呈现度高于对反家暴措施的呈现度，而且没有一家媒体它全部涉及了反家暴的我们总结了叫10项措施。那涉及到80%的这个措施的媒体呢，也只有2家，只占全部媒体的4%所以我们可以看到呢，这个是一个问题。另外呢，还有就是在疫情的最高峰的时候呢，我们可以看到中国大陆的这个报道呢，更多的是就是国际新闻也比较多国内新闻呢也没有那么多。那么这是媒体的报道呢，我主要是给大家呈现这些内容。那现在呢，我给大家简单报告一下疫情期间法院的保护令的受理情况。大家知道，保护令呢实际上是反家暴的一个非常有效的措施，它能够让受害者免于对暴力的恐惧，能够比较有效的阻止暴力的再度发生那么同时呢，它也可以在不太改变就是受害者的目前的情况，包括家庭和对孩子的照顾的情况下来发生作用。那疫情时期呢，我们从中国裁判文书网，就是最高人民法院属下的这么一个网站上呢，我们可以看出来，在中国的1月份到5月31号，就是指大多数地方的防疫措施恢复正常的这个时候为止，就前5个月当中呢，有147个基层法院对于保护令还受理了保护令并且呢做出了他们的决定。那么我们可以看到呢，其实分布并不平衡在地理上。这个147个法院当中，就重庆在中国的西南地区的一个重庆的巴南区，这个巴南区实际上是农村为主的这么一个区的人民法院呢，他们就核发了差不多90份保护令。在全部能在网上找到的283份，就是前5个月2021 2020年前5个月的283份保护令当中呢，这个巴南的保护令就占了45份。我们可以看到这个区是走在最前面的。那么我们也可以看到呢，就是说，其实在疫情最高峰，就是2020年的1月23号，武汉宣布封城，很多地方也开始了封锁政策。到2月21号，这个是根据中国的抗疫白皮书上的这个划分呢，这一阶段是疫情最严重，也是措施最严格，就居家抗疫封城的措施最严格的时期。这一期呢，法院做出的保护令裁定是最少，只有13项，而且这13项的这个保护令裁决当中呢，有一半是由刚才说的这个重庆的巴南区所做的。所以我们就可以看到在疫情最严重的时期，其实保护令呢，是最少的。那么我们从保护令的内容来看呢，保护令的申请人群比较多元，虽然妇女占绝大多数，但是我们可以从年龄看呢，不同年龄的妇女都有，也有老年妇女那么也有个别的残疾妇女。那么我们尤其是在疫情高峰期间发出的13份保护令当中呢，有5份申请人是60岁以上的妇女。那么在疫情高峰在疫情整个最严重的，我们就说2020年的前5个月的283份保护令当中呢，未成年的呢也有若干例，有1例呢残障的男性的申请人，但是几乎没有重病的申请人。少数民族申请人的数量呢，在这些上网的283份当中呢，也占比例大概是7%。中国的反家暴法呢规定了公安机关、妇女联合会、居民委员会、村民委员会、救助管理机构可以代为申请保护令。但是我们在疫情高峰的就是前5个月在283份保护令当中呢，没有发现由这些机构代为申请的保护令。这个时期的保护令呢，它基本上有效期是6个月，90%都是6个月，其次是3个月，另外还有1年的。那么我们看到在保护令在疫情时期的保护令的及时性和疫情之前仍然是存在同样的问题，就是大多数的保护令上没有体现具体的申请日期，只有立案日期和裁决日期。那么而且基本上呢是立案的当日就做出裁决，这样看上去呢好像很及时，但实际上呢给我们分析保护令的裁决是不是及时其实带来困难。因为我们如果进一步去看这个保护令的文书，可以看出来有一些保护令的其实处理很有延误的，比如说他申请保护令时候他讲的事情是发生在1月底或者2月初，他或者就是那个时候他就提交了保护令申请，但是呢直到3月中旬法院才有那个立案的这么一个记录，然后呢才进行了裁决所以我们可以看到及时性是一个问题。对，另外驳回的情况呢，时间关系我不细讲，但是我们可以看到疫情最严重的1月23号到2月27号期间的保护令呢，那个裁决就是获准的这个情况是最高的92%是获准这个高于现实当中保护令的核准率，现实当中大概是60%多到70%左右。那么在这个283份保护令当中呢，驳回的呢占了18%，驳回的常见理由就是一句话，不符合申请条件。但是呢，其实我们只要看反家暴法的话呢，反家暴法就是说，任何人你只要遭遇家庭暴力或者有遭遇家庭暴力的现实危险，都可以申请保护令。所以它这个不符合申请条件呢，但是呢，并没有更多的解释。所以我们可以看到在这一点上呢，是法官没有更多的做解释。那么而且我们尤其是看到保护令呢有若干种这个具体的措施，比如说第一个措施就是笼统的禁止家暴，第二个措施呢就是禁止比如说跟踪骚扰，或者具体的辱骂、殴打等等。第三呢就是让施暴者迁出，所以我们把第3种叫迁出令。那其实疫情期间迁出令仍然是很难获得。我们可以看到在疫情最严重的这个时间当中，那么13份保护令当中有迁出令的呢，其实有一半没有被批准所以呢迁出令的 作用远远没有得到发挥。那其实我们从新闻报道当中呢，可以看到司法系统在新冠疫情期间提供了一些临时应对措施，比如说提供了在线的服务，可以进行云端的处理，可以利用电话、微信等方式进行那个办案和开庭，等等。但是呢，这些措施我们从报道当中看到，但是从前面我分析的这些保护令的申请和裁决情况看来说呢，总体上我们觉得好像这些措施没有起到那样该起的作用我呢想我就先分享到这里。如果大家有问题的话，我们希望接下来可以有机会讨论。为平妇女支持热线呢，是目前在中国大陆唯一一个全年无休的而且可以中英双语的这样的一个热线。所以希望我们今天的大家呢自己用不着，但是可以介绍给你身边有需要的朋友。谢谢。